Welcome to this episode of OTT Talks. I'm Agnes Citriku, Programs Manager for the African Center for Parliamentary Affairs, based in Accra, Ghana. OTT Talks is a series of friendly conversations with thought leaders and practitioners in the field of EIPM, that's evidence-informed policymaking. In today's episode, we'll be discussing how evidence is used for policymaking in the Parliament of Ghana and the Ghanaian context in general, and looking at the role of parliamentary research departments. Our guest to explore this topic today is parliamentary researcher Dr. Abraham Ibn Zackaria from the Parliament of Ghana. Welcome, Dr. Zackaria. We are pleased to have you on OTT Talks today.
Thank you very much. I'm also pleased to be here.
To start off, I wanted to find out, you are the first parliamentary researcher we are hosting on OTT Talks. Could you walk us through what the Parliamentary Research Department does?
All right, so basically what the research department does in the nutshell is that it undertakes budget analysis. It analyzes the national budget when it is before the House. And what it means is that it does so along the ministries. So the Science and Environment Desk looks at all the areas of the budget that relates to science and environment and analyzes in two areas. We want to look at the financial performance of the previous year's allocations, and also look at the policy and program performance. What it means is that you want to see how they spent their money and what programs they've undertaken and whether they've been able to achieve the program targets. So you do this analysis and prepare a short brief for the relevant committees so that the committees use those briefs to engage the relevant ministries when the ministries appear before the committees to defend their current budget. The department also undertake what we call the physical impact analysis of legislation. Anytime a bill is laid in the House for consideration, by law, these bills are supposed to come with a fiscal policy report from the sponsors. But the department is also tasked to do an independent analysis to see whether the fiscal policy analysis done by the sponsors of the bill actually corresponds to what the research department does. And these are supposed to support the committees to provide them with some kind of evidence so that they can proceed with the bill. The department also undertakes policy analysis, provide policy briefs for committees, and then also undertake any other information request that will come from either individual members or a committee as a whole, and sometimes from the speakers and the leaders of the House. So in a nutshell, these are the things that the department does for now in order to support the House to execute its mandate.
That's insightful, knowing the range of services the department is providing to MPs and committees of the Ghana Parliament. Yeah. Taking it from there, how do you see evidence use in Ghanaian policy making, its role in evolving democracy and other topical issues?
And the only way you can be sure that the policy issue you are dealing with is a real problem is when you have strong evidence, when you have researchable evidence that shows that it's a real problem. And so in the policy formulation stage, you must be convinced that there's a problem and that you require evidence to be able to do that. And likewise, in the implementation and evaluation stage, you still need evidence to convince yourself that you are on the right track. And so without evidence, you wouldn't be able to address the policy needs of the society. And therefore, your democracy probably will still be hanging. And so we say that evidence supports policymaking, leads to achieving the desired goals of any policy that you want to implement. But if you don't have the real evidence, and then you think that by implementing this policy, you are going to achieve B. If your evidence, then of course you are not going to get that desired outcome. And so for me, I think that using evidence in policy making underpins any successful or effective democracy, particularly in the developing countries. So within the context of the legislature, we can see interest, picking up as far as evidence is concerned. There are a number of policy proposals, legislations that really bring into the fore the push for the use of evidence in Ghana. I know in the executive, that is the presidencies, they have a different system, even though they also rely on a number of policy, a number of evidence to push their policies through. But when you come to Parliament, that is a recent phenomenon that is picking up. Because, for instance, if you notice that there is a requirement that any legislation that should be laid before the House for any decision, that legislation, that bill that is coming to House must be accompanied by a fiscal impact analysis. Now, the essence of it is that the committee, or for that matter, Parliament as a whole, needs to be informed and of this fiscal impact analysis. That is what the impact of the legislation would be on the society in terms of revenues, in terms of expenditure. That is a very strong evidence that will convince the House to either pass the bill into law or refuse to pass that bill. And that is a legal requirement that we should always have, that shows that Parliament of Ghana is really in for evidence making, evidence-informed policy making when it comes to the legislation. We are also aware that in the Ghanaian context, any proposals in terms of loan agreement, in terms of just any international business agreement that is coming to the House must also be accompanied by three key things, and those are all supposed to serve as evidence. One is that we should have what you call the audit report. Is it a financial impact audit report? Value for money audit report. That's the word. The value for money, that any engagement in terms of loans agreement, we want to know the value for that agreement, the value for money, and it must come with the loan agreement to Parliament. And so Parliament is supposed to use that to convince itself that there is value for that agreement. There's also a requirement that Attorney General's advice must also come. That means that on the legal angle, there's evidence that we are within. And so Attorney General advice is required, and the Ministry of Finance advice is also required. So these are three key things that accompanies most proposals that comes to the House. And the essence of these three things is that we should be informed. We want to be convinced based on evidence that is doable, then before the House can go ahead to do it. So those are the things that really shows that in the context, in the Ghanaian context, we are serious about using evidence in making policies. Agnes.
Thank you, Dr. Zak. Those are interesting things that are happening within the context, particularly where it's even in law, having a legal requirement for fiscal impact analysis, etc. Yeah. So apart from that and those other three things you mentioned as requirements to accompany international business proposals, I want to find out, are there any other innovations within your department, for instance, or in Parliament as an institution that is aimed at promoting evidence use, and whether these are bringing about the desired change?
Yes, there are a number of changes that goes on, particularly with the research department and other departments. First of all, we believe in citizens' input into bills. It's another source of evidence that we engage in. Anytime there is a bill that is laid for consideration, once the bill gets to the committee advertises the bill and then invite memoranda from the public, from interest groups and the rest, to bring in what really they think, what their views are as far as the bill is concerned. And those ones are used as inputs into the bill when the committee is looking at it. The research department itself undertake what we call pre-legislative scrutiny. So when the bill is at the committee level, then the research department will also do its own analysis of the bill to provide some basis for the committee so that the committee can use that. The other thing we do is that when the budget is being implemented, the committee undertakes what we call monitoring, and most of the times is to engage citizens, people who are benefiting from some the activities of this bill. During the implementation stage of budgets, committees undertake monitoring, and then the essence of that monitoring is to get the views of citizens as far as the implementation of projects are concerned. And so we sometimes apply this community scorecard to get their views, and the report that emanates from this finds its way into the chamber for discussion. Members are able to write statements and raise questions that invite ministers to answer based on the report of the community scorecard or the budget monitoring. There's also this issue that we think also helps in providing evidence. That is when what we usually term as the post-budget workshops. You know, anytime the budget is laid in Parliament, what Parliament does is that you take 1 week away and they invite think tanks, they invite academia, they invite CSOs, other people who really understand budget to analyze the budget but sector by sector, and then come to present to members of Parliament. At the end of the budget workshop, members of Parliament they are equipped with knowledge about the budget. They are also informed some of the do's, some of the good things in the budget, some of the bad things in the budget, and they are provided with questions which they can ask the ministers and the ministries when they appear before them. So the post-budget workshop is one key source of evidence that support the House when it is engaging the ministries. Now, the other thing I need to add is that because of the importance that Parliament of Ghana attaches to evidence in terms of using when it is in terms of policy making, as far as the legislature is concerned, our recent restructuring of the parliamentary service has created more departments, more structures that are, concentrating on just producing evidence. They have introduced what we call the post. That is what is happening in the House of Commons, Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, which will concentrate on just providing evidence related to certain issues that concern science to support committees. The new restructure has also introduced a department called the Budget and Fiscal Analysis Office, which will also concentrate on analyzing budget and other fiscal things that comes to the House. It has also added a policy analysis department, which will also concentrate on only analyzing policies. Now, these three departments, in addition to the research department, is actually adding up a lot that will actually pick us up when it comes to providing evidence to the House. Agnes.
That's a lot of interesting things happening in the Parliament. The introduction of posts after the UK model and the budget and fiscal analysis units. That seems like a great boost for evidence supply and hopefully uptake. I just wanted to touch quickly on some of the things you cited. For instance, the post-budget workshops and other sources of evidence that you've alluded to. How would you assess the impacts on the eventual budgets that are passed by the Ghanaian Parliament?
Well, it's really, the impact is actually great, as particularly when it comes to debate. You know, there's a very good component or aspect of the budget process when it is laid in the House is debating the policy of the budget and sometimes the figures. And the challenge we usually have with members of Parliament is that a lot of them are not that technical to be able to understand this budget and be able to make their contribution or debate the policy. But what we now notice is that with the post-budget workshops, members of Parliament leave the workshop with informed mind. Some of them had their questions, some of them are able to even speak and debate based on the information that they got from the post-budget workshop. So, and they are able to contribute, and sometimes at the committee level, they are able to take on ministers on the way the budget is done, or some of the allocations, or some of their performance, particularly the previous year's budgets, because all that is gotten from the post-budget workshop.
Thank you. What advice would you give to any researchers who want to use their research to influence policy making in Ghana, either through the legislature or through the executive or any other policy making arena?
Well, it's very simple. You see, there are so many ways. First, engaging the policymakers before embarking on the research is very important, because sometimes you don't know the evidence needs of the policymaker. And if you don't know and you undertake your research and you think they would use it, perhaps they will not use it. But if you engage them and then tailor your research to a particular, to the calendar of the institution. For instance, if Parliament, there is a bill that is of interest to you, then you think that you can undertake some work, you can engage the committee and then provide them with the information. The second advice is that it's the language that we use in academia vis-a-vis the policymakers' language. So if you are a researcher and then perhaps you undertake research, the language you use for your fellow researchers should be different when you are using the same materials for policymakers, because they want simple language because they are not technical. And so if you have to reduce your technical knowledge, language to very simple language so that anybody who picks that document can understand what is there. The third thing is that the size of what the documents, because policymakers don't really have time, particularly members of Parliament. They don't really have time to read voluminous documents. So they need very, very summarized ones, but that still have the essentials of your research findings. So any research done that is meant to support policymakers must be brief, very brief, but contain the essential elements of the research. So once these three things are properly observed, it will be very good and it will be accepted within the setting.
Finally, Doc, you've been involved in the first collaboration between the Ghanaian Parliament and the Ghana Statistical Service. What
Yeah.
has this collaboration been like for you? And have there been any surprising insights or lessons that you could share?
Yes, that collaboration has been very good. You know, before that project, before the DAP one, I believe that Parliament, particularly the research department, were operating in silos. Even though we knew of Ghana Statistical Service and other data generating institutions around, there was not that collaboration. We didn't have that connections whereby we could access data and information as and when we wanted it. Access information for Ghana Statistical Service and the rest were very, very difficult. So sometimes you have to go through a lot. But with the project actually brought us together. It brought Parliament, researcher, and Ghana Statistical Service together. We worked in groups. The capacities of researchers were built when it comes to understanding data from Ghana Statistical Service and doing some analysis. The capacities were built and it's easier to do that. Secondly, the collaboration, we have this contact whereby now Statistical Service can easily send information to us without even us requesting. Because we now know each other, you know, one-on-one. You can just call one person for Ghana Statistical Service, I need this, and the next minute it is there. Before that, it wasn't the case, because we didn't even know each other. And even though we knew that there were information that we could share. So now sharing information is very key, and that it's very easy between us and the Ghana Statistical Service.
Thank you, Dr. Zach, for sharing your experience having collaborated or through your collaboration with the Ghana Statistical Service. That is something that is still ongoing, and I'm sure there'll be more to learn down the road.
Exactly.
Well, that brings us towards the end of our talk. As you have heard from Dr. Zach, parliaments and policymakers do need the evidence that is being produced by researchers and think tanks out there. But to make sure that this evidence is taken up, we need to keep it brief. We need to engage policymakers before we start our research work, particularly where it's in an area of interest. And also, we need to ensure that we use simple language when we are trying to provide evidence to policymakers. Dr. Zach also highlighted the importance of brokering relationships, building networks with producers, both from the state side and non-state side. Thank you, Doc, so much for sharing these insights with us. We wish you well in your work. To our audience, we thank you for tuning into this episode of OTT Talks. For more information about the Data Accountability Project, which introduced work with the Ghana Statistical Service and Parliament towards monitoring the SDGs, please check the websites of ASEPA or on think tanks. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you so much.